Hi, I'm Madhavi and I'm going to tell you all about my transition to a plant-based diet. Wherever we are born, we begin to accept our social reality as the only given way of life. We are inculcated with certain values, certain principles and lifestyles, and we begin to think that this is what life entails and this is how we ought to be living. And rarely do we contest or contradict such behaviors, and sometimes they seem to be very normal to us. But what exactly is normal and what exactly is our reality is something we begin to learn as we move ahead in life. I was born in a family. Ironically, it was a non-vegetarian way of life. Accompanying my mother to a mutton shop or a grocery store was routine for me. But gradually, I began to witness the discomfort within myself when I saw what was happening around me. Young and naive, I thought it was common that animals were destined to be killed to satisfy human needs and pleasures. I grew up listening to the virtues of a non-vegetarian diet, of how it gave us high protein and how it was important to have non-vegetarian food in times of sickness. But gradually I realized that this was the creation of our own social settings and our own ideas, and that there were much better substitutes and better ways of living. My connection with nature goes back to my childhood days when I thoroughly enjoyed the pristine, clean air and the beautiful, peaceful surroundings of my hometown Pune until I witnessed its environmental degradation. And then I felt the urgency to act and I started making changes in my own personal life. I began to explore more information and happenings across the world that corroborated my thought process. And I realized that an act in isolation is of great value. But as a human race, we must awaken that it is not what is happening immediately around us, but an act which is performed mindlessly in any one part of the world can have an implication in any other part of the world. My struggle to convince people around me led me to serious disappointments, and I had to find a way to deal with my uneasiness. I was fortunate to find solace in my art practice. I celebrated the natural world through my art and enjoyed my conversations with my audience. And through these conversations, I met some environmentalists and nature lovers who educated me about the climate crisis. By then, I thought technology had made great advances and that technology will give us all the answers and bring a change. But when I did my course with the Ecological Society in Pune, I learned that our lifestyle choices play a significant role in dealing with the climate crisis. And this is when I learned about a lifestyle, a way of thinking rather than just living and eating, is about being vegan. Vegan? Yes. The term vegan has been layered with fallacies of multiple interpretations and myths. Some say it's a fad diet, some say it's a Western concept. But that's not true. And are we accepting and believing these ideas the way they've been presented to us by the media? Or are we really diving into these ideas to understand what they really mean? Veganism is a lifestyle based on compassion, and it finds its origin in our own Indian philosophy of ahimsa. It implies causing the least harm to any human or non-human being as we exist on this planet. Veganism has been wrongly perceived as a lifestyle in pursuit of higher moral grounds or a lifestyle based on deprivation. On the contrary, it helps us thrive and build a symbiotic relationship with our natural world and live in equity with all the creatures of this planet. It is a way to coexist and seek cooperation, without which human existence is not possible. And although I turned vegan for the animals, the environmental perspective of veganism intrigued me a lot, especially because I knew that India is home to the world's largest cattle population as well as the total livestock population. I reached out to experts and I decided to study the subject, and the science was clear. Most of the reputable scientists and organizations from across the world had one thing to say, that animal agriculture has the most devastating impact on the environment and that a global shift to a plant-based diet can mitigate the climate crisis. Because as per the recent IPCC report, there are other greenhouse gases other than CO2, like methane and nitrous oxide, which are emitted primarily by the animal agriculture industry and which are 80 times and 285 times more potent in heating the planet. If we reduce the emissions of these two gases, we can stabilize the planet's temperature to at least 1.5 degrees. Animal agriculture is also the leading cause of pandemics because vast tracts of forests are being cleared to graze cattle or to grow crops for livestock. This displaces wildlife from their natural habitat and forces them to move towards human settlements in search of food and shelter, and creates chances of the virus from them to jump to humans or domesticated animals, thus creating grounds for a pandemic. When I decided to go vegan, I thought the transition is not going to be easy. But when I did my research, I realized that being Indian was a great advantage to make the shift, because we are already blessed with an abundant supply of a variety of fruits and vegetables. And if we look back at our scriptures and our Vedas, our true vegetarian food habits stand the test of time. I was thrilled to know that the transition is going to be smooth and easy despite my busy schedule. And although I received strange responses from my friends and relatives, I made the experience more enjoyable and creative. I started replacing my meals with plant-based options, starting with breakfast. Then I started preparing plant-based milk at home as and when required, because I learned that milk can be easily replaced with other plant-based options to meet our daily nutritional requirements. I started gathering recipes which are plant-based by default. And then common Indian desserts like kheer or halwa, they turned out just as good without the use of any ghee or milk. And after I made this basic transition, I started exploring for more recipes to meet my kids' likings for something like pastry or cheese. And then I transitioned to a whole food diet. The health benefits were also a very motivating factor. Within a few days of shifting to a plant-based diet, I began to experience certain positive changes in my health. I started feeling a lot lighter, more energetic, and I lost weight. And if this is how I felt by just shifting to a plant-based diet, I couldn't wait to experience a whole food diet. There is the notion that shifting to a plant-based diet is expensive. But when we think of our traditional pure vegetarian eating habits, we consume food in its most natural and minimally processed state. And that's why it is not expensive as compared to the vegan meat and dairy alternatives, which are expensive. This shift is urgent. The sooner we make the shift, the better. But that does not mean we need to rush with all the changes at once. Be considerate to yourself. Speak to your family members. And then make a plan for yourself. Either start by replacing every meal with a plant-based option, or then start giving up, say, first red meat, followed by chicken, fish and eggs, and lastly dairy. But make sure you're watching documentaries like Cowspiracy, What the Health, The Game Changer, or The Deadly Dairy to update your knowledge about the importance of making this shift. And then we have organizations like Sharan India, which are helping people in India to make the shift to a plant-based diet. And of course, don't worry about your protein intake. In fact, make sure not having excessive proteins, because excessive proteins is bad for your health. And now most of you may be thinking about the important role milk plays in our day-to-day diet, which is true, because since generations, milk has become an integral part of our diet. Right from a morning chai or coffee, it finds its way in most of the foods that we eat throughout the day. And because we are so dependent on milk, we must know how and where milk is produced. The happy images of cows we see on the dairy and milk products marketed to us give us a false image of the dairy industry. Like other animal industries, dairy is also based on exploitation and destruction. And if that's not enough, I must inform you that the biggest problem with consumption of milk is its production. 79% of the milk produced in Maharashtra alone, which also includes branded milk, does not meet the safety standards set by the Food Safety and Standards Authority of India. And there's one more interesting fact I'd like to tell you. Humans are the only animals who drink milk from other species. And this goes against the law of nature, by which animals produce milk to meet the nutritional requirements of their own species. Not only that, but 60 to 80% of Indians are lactose intolerant. When we are born, our body produces an enzyme called lactase to break down the protein in our mother's milk. And when we start teething, the production of this enzyme stops and we can no longer digest milk. And we start experiencing symptoms like bloating, gas, or indigestion. And further ahead, when we continue having milk, we may experience health problems like early onset of puberty, PCOD, or obesity. Being an activist, I knew my personal actions had to be amplified to collective actions to make a greater impact. And I shared this vision with the co-founders of my NGO, Jiva Bhavna. Our organization's main mission is to assist farmers in their transition to natural plant-based farming practices, to support the environment, and to ensure a dependable livelihood to the farmers. We recently launched our flagship project Urvarasa, which focuses on the transformation of the food system in India. There is a general perception that farmers will suffer economic losses if we stopped consuming animal-based products. We decided to take a closer look. We visited farmers and interacted with them to understand how they function. And what we noticed was very appalling. Farmers do not maintain financial accounts. They don't realize that rearing animals is draining them of their time, money, and resources. Fodder prices are escalating, and so is water scarcity. Farmers are unable to feed their own family members to take care of the farmed animals. Tragically, according to the Global Hunger Index, India is home to 1/4 of the total global hungry population, of whom most are farmers. Farmers are rearing animals because they receive financial support from the government in the form of subsidies. But if these subsidies are withdrawn, the current system will come down like a pack of cards. On the other hand, if we all shift to a plant-based diet, we'll be creating a positive feedback loop for the farmer by increasing the demand for fruits, vegetables, and grains. And not only that, if we take a step further and source food from a local farmer, not only will we reduce our own carbon footprint, but we will ensure a market for the farmer. And this will encourage him to take up natural farming practices which are low on cost, as against going for monocropping, which requires him to take a bank loan for buying expensive seeds and synthetic fertilizers and pesticides, and which may lead him to bankruptcy and committing suicide. A direct connection between the farmer and the consumer ensures fair compensation for the important work he is doing. And at the same time, the consumer who is supporting this transformational system gets easy access to naturally grown, nutrient-dense food, which is essential, especially in the current times. This knowledge is extremely important for the youth, especially because they face the maximum risk from the impacts of climate change. And shifting to a plant-based diet gives us the unique opportunity to empower every individual to act from the next meal. No government policy or government support is required to change this personal habit. Scientists say that a global shift to a plant-based diet will free up 75% of our current farmland for rewilding and reduce 73% of our emissions coming from food. And before I conclude, I'd like to quote Dr. Shailesh Rao, founder of Climate Healers. He says, "Compassion for all life is infinitely sustainable." Thank you.